Being so poor that every single coin in your pocket matters, where one wrong move could leave your family hungry for weeks. That was the life of a simple farmer who spent his days working the land, barely scraping by. But everything changed the day he took a risk that no one saw coming. In a moment of desperation, or maybe fate, he spent his last savings on a scrawny, unknown horse that everyone else had ignored. Little did he know, this decision would twist his life in ways he never imagined. The farmer had always been cautious, a man who believed in hard work over luck. But when a traveling trader came through the village with a group of horses, something strange happened. While the other villagers picked the strongest, most beautiful animals, the farmer's eyes locked onto the weakest one, a thin, tired creature with a strange gleam in its eyes. The trader laughed when the farmer offered his last bit of money for it. "That horse is worthless," he sneered. But the farmer didn't care. There was something about this animal, something almost unnatural. At first, things only got worse. The horse refused to plow fields. It didn't pull carts. The villagers mocked the farmer, saying he had thrown away his last chance at survival. But then, one stormy night, everything changed. The horse began acting strangely, restless, almost as if it sensed something. The farmer followed it into the woods, his lantern barely cutting through the darkness. And what he found there, well, let's just say it was nothing like he expected. Because this wasn't just any horse. There was a secret hidden beneath its ragged coat, a secret that would turn the farmer's misery into an unimaginable fortune. But secrets like this don't stay buried for long. And as whispers began spreading through the village, dangerous eyes turned toward the farmer's humble home. Someone else wondered what he had found. Someone who wouldn't hesitate to take it by force. The farmer thought his biggest problem was poverty. But now he had something far worse to fear, because that horse, the one everyone had called worthless, was the key to something much bigger than money. And if he wasn't careful, it might just cost him his life. The farmer had spent his whole life in the same village, where the soil was stubborn and the winters were cruel. Most people there knew nothing but struggle, days spent over crops, fingers cracked from the cold, and nights spent worrying if the next harvest would be enough. He was no different. But deep down, he had always believed that luck had to change someday. Maybe that was why he had taken the risk on that strange horse, even when every voice around him said it was a mistake. At first, the horse did nothing but eat and wander. It didn't obey commands like a normal animal. Sometimes it would vanish for hours, only to reappear at the edge of the woods, watching the farmer with eyes that seemed too knowing. The villagers whispered that the beast was cursed, that it had been traded away for a reason. But the farmer ignored them. He had seen something in those dark eyes, something almost human. Then came the storm. Rain lashed the village, turning the roads to mud and sending everyone indoors. But the horse grew restless, kicking at the stable door until the farmer had no choice but to follow it into the night. The wind howled like a warning as they pushed through the trees, branches clawing at them like bony fingers. And then there was a patch of earth where the horse stopped, pawing at the ground with an urgency that sent chills down the farmer's spine. He dug with his bare hands, rain soaking through his clothes, until his fingers hit something hard. Metal, a small rusted chest, half buried in the mud. His heart pounded as he pried it open, and the flickering lantern light caught the glint of gold coins, more money than he had ever seen in his life. But beneath them lay something else, a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age, covered in symbols he couldn't read. The farmer barely slept that night. Who had hidden this treasure? And why had the horse led him to it? The next morning, he tried to act normal, but the weight of the secret made his hands shake. He sold a single coin in the next town over, just enough to buy food without raising suspicion. But when he returned, a stranger was waiting near his farm, a man in a long coat, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't speak, just watched the horse with a slow, calculating smile. That night, the farmer found strange footprints near the stable. Someone had been there, examining the animal's hooves, the marks in the dirt too deliberate to be random. And then, as he turned to leave, he saw it, a symbol carved into the stable door, the same one from the parchment, a message or a warning. The horse grew more restless, ears twitching at sounds the farmer couldn't hear. And then 3 days later, the first villager disappeared. A young shepherd, last seen near the woods. No one thought much of it, until his dog came back alone, whimpering, its fur matted with something dark. The farmer knew then that the treasure wasn't just a gift. It was a key to something far older and far more dangerous than he could imagine. And now, whatever had been sleeping in those woods was waking up. The stranger in the coat returned the next evening, this time with others. They stood at the edge of the farm, silent, waiting. The horse reared, nostrils flaring, as if it sensed what was coming. The farmer knew he had to run, but with what he now carried, there was nowhere left to hide. What was written on that parchment? Who were these strangers? And why did they want the horse? Not for its strength, but for something far worse? The answers would come at a price, and the farmer was about to pay it. The farmer knew he was being watched. Every time he stepped outside, the hairs on his neck stood up, like the air itself was warning him. The strangers didn't approach again, but they didn't leave either. They lingered at the village tavern, asking careful questions about old legends, about things buried and forgotten. The villagers, superstitious and wary, tightened their shutters early. Whispers spread of dark riders who came at dusk, their coats hiding marks no ordinary man would bear. The farmer tried to decipher the strange parchment, but the symbols swam before his eyes, twisting like living things under candlelight. He thought of taking it to the old hermit who lived near the blacksmith's forge, a man rumored to know things beyond ordinary folk. But was it safe? The hermit had his own secrets, and trust was a luxury the farmer couldn't afford. Meanwhile, the horse grew more restless. It refused to eat, pacing the stable with an energy that bordered on frenzy. Some nights, the farmer swore he heard it whispering, not in words, but in sounds that mimicked voices just beyond hearing. Then, one morning, he found the stall empty, the doors still latched from the inside. His blood turned to ice. The horse couldn't have escaped, unless it hadn't escaped at all, unless something had taken it. He followed the tracks, not hoofprints, but deep, clawed gouges in the earth, leading straight into the heart of the woods. The same woods where the shepherd had vanished, the same woods where the chest had been buried. The farmer gripped the knife at his belt, but he knew, deep down, no blade would save him from what waited in those shadows. Back in the village, the strangers grew bolder. They stopped pretending to be traders or travelers. They demanded answers about the horse, about the farmer, about things no one should have known. The village elder, a tired man with sunken eyes, warned the farmer to leave while he still could. "That beast was never yours to keep," he muttered. "Some debts are paid in gold, others in blood." That night, the farmer dreamed of the horse, but it wasn't a horse anymore. It stood on two legs, its coat peeling away like old bark, revealing something gaunt and grinning beneath. It spoke a single word, a name, before the farmer jolted awake, drenched in sweat. Outside his window, the wind carried the sound of laughter. Not human, not animal, something in between. The next morning, the village was too quiet. No children playing, no blacksmith's hammer, just the creak of empty doors swinging in the breeze. The farmer entered the tavern, to the fields, nothing. Only the strangers remained, seated at a table as if waiting for him. One of them slid a coin across the wood. It wasn't gold. It was bone. "You should have left it buried," the man said, his voice like dry leaves crumbling. "But now it's awake, and it's hungry." The farmer backed away, but the road out of the village was gone, swallowed by a mist that hadn't been there moments before. The trees leaned in, their branches knitting together like prison bars. Somewhere in the distance, the horse screamed. Or maybe it wasn't the horse at all. The strangers stood. Their coats fell open, and the farmer finally saw what they had been hiding. The farmer's breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled back from the strangers, their true forms now unveiled beneath those tattered coats. Their skin wasn't skin at all. It was something stretched too tight over jagged bones, shifting unnaturally like shadows given flesh. The one who had spoken grinned, his teeth too many, too sharp. "Run if you want," he hissed. "But the woods remember, and they're hungry." The mist coiled around the farmer's ankles like cold fingers as he turned and fled, not toward the empty village, but into the trees, the only place left to go. Branches whipped at his face, drawing blood, but he didn't stop. Behind him, the strangers didn't chase. They didn't need to. They knew where he was heading, where it wanted him to go. Deep in the forest, the air grew thick with the smell of wet earth and something older, something rotting. The farmer's foot caught on a root, sending him crashing to the ground. When he looked up, he saw them, the missing villagers, standing motionless between the trees. Their eyes were empty, their mouths slack. Not dead, not alive, just waiting. A sound cut through the silence, a familiar whinny. The horse stood ahead, its coat now gleaming unnaturally in the dim light, its eyes burning like embers. It stamped its hoof, and the ground trembled. The farmer reached for it, desperate, but the creature reared back with a scream that wasn't animal. The sound tore through the forest, shaking the leaves from the trees. And then, from the darkness behind it, something stirred. The earth split open. Roots twisted like waking snakes, and the farmer finally understood. The treasure, the horse, the strangers, none of it was chance. The chest hadn't been buried. It had been planted. A seed, and he had fed it. The villagers began to chant, their voices blending into a single hollow drone. The horse's body shuddered, its shape melting, reforming, no longer a beast, but a gateway. A door, and on the other side, something was pushing through. The farmer scrambled back, but the roots lashed around his wrists, dragging him toward the widening fissure. The last thing he saw before the ground swallowed him whole was the bone coin, now glowing like a dead star, and the strangers kneeling in reverence, not to the horse, to what was coming. And in the silence that followed, deep beneath the earth, the farmer heard it, a heartbeat, not his own. The darkness pressed against the farmer like a living thing, thick and suffocating. The roots binding him pulsed with a sickening rhythm, as if drawing life from his terror. He could feel something moving in the earth beneath him, something vast and ancient stirring from its slumber. The villagers' chants echoed through the tunnels, their hollow voices twisting into something between a prayer and a scream. Then, light, faint at first, then growing brighter. The farmer blinked against the glow, realizing with a jolt that it was coming from him. The bone coin he'd tucked away in his pocket was burning through his clothes, its eerie radiance pushing back the darkness. The roots recoiled, hissing like wet wood thrown on fire. For one desperate moment, he was free. But the coin wasn't a gift, it was a beacon. Above him, the ground trembled as the horse, no, the thing that had been the horse, let out a shriek that split the air. The farmer clawed his way up through the crumbling earth, his hands bleeding, his lungs burning. When he broke the surface, the forest was gone. In its place stood a twisted version of his village, the houses warped into grotesque shapes, the sky a swirling void. The strangers stood in a circle, their forms flickering between human and something else, their chants rising to a fever pitch. And in the center of it all, the horse's remains were unraveling, its flesh peeling back to reveal a gaping maw lined with thorns, not a door, a throat. The farmer stumbled back, but a hand caught his arm, the village elder, his eyes clear for the first time in years. "You woke it," he whispered, his voice raw with fear. "But the coin, it shows you. It's the only thing that can send it back." Before the farmer could ask what that meant, the elder shoved him forward, straight toward the circle. The strangers turned as one, their grins widening impossibly. The maw in the ground yawned open, and from its depths came a sound that wasn't sound at all, but pull, a hunger so deep it threatened to unravel the farmer's very bones. The coin flared hotter in his grip. It wasn't just light, it was a choice. And then, from the void beneath him, something blinked. The farmer's hands shook as the bone coin burned against his palm, its light cutting through the unnatural darkness like a blade. The thing beneath him, the ancient hunger that had worn his horse's skin, let out a shuddering groan that shook the twisted village to its foundations. The strangers' chanting reached a fever pitch, their bodies stretching and warping as the ritual reached its final moments. With no time left to think, the farmer did the only thing he could. He threw the coin straight into the gaping maw. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the world exploded in white fire. The light tore through the creature's form, peeling back layers of shadow and bone like rotten cloth. The villagers' hollow eyes snapped back to life as the spell binding them shattered. The strangers screamed as their stolen forms unraveled, their true shapes, withered, grasping things, briefly visible before the light consumed them. The ground heaved, the false village collapsing in on itself like a bad dream at dawn. And then, silence. The farmer found himself kneeling in the real village square, the morning sun warm on his back. The houses stood whole again. Birds sang in the trees. It was as if nothing had happened, except for the single terrible proof clutched in his hand. The coin had returned to him. But it was different now. The bone had turned dark as old blood, and etched into its surface was a new symbol, one that matched the markings on the stable door. The farmer's blood ran cold as he realized the truth. The ritual hadn't been stopped. It had been completed. From the edge of the woods came a sound, hoofbeats, slow, steady, coming closer. The farmer looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. Standing at the tree line was the horse. Its coat gleamed with unnatural health, its eyes burning with familiar intelligence. But there was something else now, something in the way it held itself, and the knowing tilt of its head. It wasn't the creature anymore. It was something wearing what the creature had left behind. And it was smiling. The farmer stood frozen as the horse, or what had once been his force, tilted its head in that eerily human way. Its dark eyes held centuries of secrets, yet there was something almost gentle in its gaze now. The morning sun glinted off its sleek coat, making the creature look less like a monster and more like something different. Something changed. A soft wind rustled through the village, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers. The villagers began emerging from their homes, blinking like sleepwalkers waking from a long nightmare. They looked around in confusion, touching their faces as if to confirm they were real. The farmer watched as the village elder stumbled forward, his hands trembling as he reached for the farmer's arm. "It's over?" the old man whispered, his voice cracking with hope. The farmer glanced back at the horse. It pawed the ground once, a familiar gesture that sent a shiver down his spine, before turning and walking calmly toward the edge of the woods. Not running, not attacking, just leaving. He could have let it go, should have maybe. But as the creature paused at the tree line and looked back at him, the farmer felt something unexpected, not fear but understanding. This thing, whatever it was now, had been trapped just as much as the village had been. The real monster was gone. What remained was something else entirely. With slow, deliberate steps, the farmer followed. The forest welcomed them both, sunlight filtering through the leaves in dappled patterns on the mossy ground. The deeper they went, the lighter the farmer felt, as if some invisible weight had been lifting from his shoulders with every step. When they finally stopped in a small clearing, the horse, no, he couldn't call it that anymore, lowered its head and nudged something half buried in the soil. Gold coins, dozens of them. Real ones this time, gleaming and pure. Enough to feed the village for years, enough to start anew. The creature met the farmer's eyes one last time before turning and vanishing between the trees, its form shimmering briefly in the light before disappearing completely. The farmer knelt, running his fingers through the coins, and realized with a quiet shock that they were warm to the touch. Not cursed. Not haunted. Just a gift. Back in the village, life returned slowly but surely. The crops grew taller than anyone remembered. The wells never ran dry. And though the villagers whispered about the farmer's strange fortune, none could deny that whatever darkness had touched their home was gone for good. The farmer never saw the creature again, though sometimes on quiet evenings when the fire burned low, he'd catch a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods, a shadow that might have been a horse or a man or something in between. He'd raise his cup in silent thanks, and if the wind carried the faintest sound of hoofbeats in response, while some mysteries were better left unsolved. Years later, when travelers asked about the village's sudden prosperity, the farmer would just smile and pat the bone coin he still carried in his pocket, now smooth from wear, its edges softened by time. "Luck's a funny thing," he'd say. "Sometimes it looks like a curse. Sometimes it looks like a horse. And sometimes," he glanced toward the woods, where the first stars were just beginning to appear. "Sometimes it's just waiting for you to be brave enough to recognize it." And with that, he took another sip of his drink, leaving the travelers to wonder what kind of man could sound so at peace with the unknown. But that, as they say, is a story for another time.